Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak gearing up for Week 14 road trip. It's been a while. They're going to New Jersey to take on New York. We got some good news this week a little bit. You know, we got some potential bodies returning to the offense, which is much needed. But, Jeff, this Giants team, we're going to be, previewing that matchup, obviously, with Paul Dottino coming up. Really looks like an easy W. You hate to say that going into a matchup, but this Giants squad just completely reeling this season.
Yeah, I mean, everything has gone wrong for the Giants. Like everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. And so we'll get into that. Yeah, this first segment, we'll do kind of a rundown. We'll do the injuries. We'll do all that. Want to talk about Kendre Miller. He had a lot to say this week, so want to get into that interview. Got a chance to catch up with him. Not a big DA fan, but we'll get into more of that. Also want to talk about Darren Rizzi kind of having a homecoming, if you will. So we'll talk about that. Second segment, Paul Dottino, as you mentioned, a reporter, host for WFAN, Giants Radio Network, kind of giving us the lowdown on what's going on with the Giants. Drew Lock's going to be the quarterback again, whatever that means. I don't know. It's I think his ship has sailed in terms of being a starter, but hey, I thought the same thing about Sam Darnold. So, here we are. Anyway, so we'll do that in the second segment. Final segment, it's going to be X factors, but not really. Like the X factors in a game like this are kind of like, okay, do you suck or do you not suck? That's the X factor. But I have a really funny clip from Mark Schlereth that I want to play because Mark's been going off on wide receivers on WWL lately, and I've been getting a kick out of it, so I want to play it. And a bunch of other things. I want to talk to Derek Carr about playing in the cold, that sort of stuff. Kevin Austin Jr., what's up with him? All that good stuff. But let's get back. First segment, talking about injuries, talking about offensive linemen. I think there is some sort of barrier in the universe that says the Saints are not allowed to have all 5 starting offensive linemen at once because Erik McCoy, Lucas Patrick, back to practice. Cesar Ruiz, gone. He's in the concussion protocol. Apparently, he didn't leave the game against the Rams, but apparently he wasn't feeling too hot afterwards, and turns out he ended up with a concussion at some point in that game. Don't know when, but he's in the concussion protocol. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Sounds like the team is hopeful that they can get him back. He can progress through that pretty quickly. Did see him around the locker room. It's not like he's got these crazy concussion symptoms. I think it's more of a matter of, okay, what's the protocol and can you get through those steps? But it's just annoying. It's like every time you're like, oh, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right?
No, but the positive, at least, Lucas Patrick, Erik McCoy, obviously the big one right there. And hopefully, McCoy's groin issue can hold up because he's not just, key for this game and the rest of the season, but obviously the future too. You don't want to do any further damage there. I can't imagine, gutting through a groin injury as an offensive lineman.
Well, particularly as a center. Because just the way you have to set in the, it's just like if you're a catcher in baseball, like you're constantly having to kind of get down. It puts a lot of stress on that part of your body. So this is what Darren Rizzi had to say on Wednesday when he was asked about McCoy and the situation.
Good, yeah, good. Erik and Lucas back out today. Practice. Good to have those guys out there. Obviously, we were smart with the rep count and all that, but both those guys have been working hard to get back. So good to see those guys back integrated with the team, and everything's trending in the right direction for both those guys. So that could be a positive for us for sure.
But yeah, so we'll see. I think you are at a point in your season where if you had concerns over his health, if you're worried that, okay, he might injure it worse, you probably would shelve a guy. And if it's not this week, it's soon. So I don't know, we'll see. Hopefully it's not anything that's lingering and you can kind of push past it, but definitely not ideal. Either way, I think getting him back will be a factor. I think it would have been I don't know if it would have been a different game, but I think you would have had a better shot against the Rams if Erik had been out there. For Lucas Patrick, it's big because Nick Saldiveri, while they're not ruling him out for the rest of the season, he suffered a significant knee injury.
Right.
I don't know if it's ACL tear like Taysom Hill. It doesn't sound like it, but he's definitely going to be out for a while. So you really don't have a lot of answers at the guard spot, right? Particularly if you have to replace Cesar this week. You only have so many backup guards. You probably have to turn to Landon Young. Kyle Hergel took over for Nick Saldiveri late in that game. So against the Rams after Nick went out for that final drive. So, maybe he's a guy who can step in and do that. But one way or another, the offensive line is the tackles are always there. Tackles are solid. But past that, it's just it's a house of cards.
One question I had too with the injury report, I know Juwan Johnson was on it with a foot issue. I'm not sure if that's something he's been dealing with or that happened last game. But obviously, with the amount of weapons down with this team right now, and I know Morrow also on the injury rundown. So the tight end position, we already know Taysom's out, is really banged up, to say the least, right now.
Foster's been dealing with that shoulder injury for a while, and it's nothing to be concerned with. He was limited all last week too. Jawan, both these guys, I think it's just maintenance. I don't think either of these guys are at risk. Jawan did have, anytime you see foot with a guy who dealt with foot surgery in the offseason, it's obviously a little bit of a concern, but I'm not worried about it. I think it's just a point in the season where Wednesday practices, if someone's kind of achy, you just give them some extra time and let them recover. I don't think either of those guys are at risk of missing a game. The good news, 2 guys got back from IR this week. One is wide receiver Bub Means. Both these guys got hurt in week 8 against the Chargers. Bub Means had a high ankle sprain, went on IR. He's back, so we'll see if maybe he can get out there this week. Saints are going to have some questions to answer at wide receiver. We'll talk about that in the back end. But then Kendre Miller, who, probably didn't have to go on IR at all, especially if you ask Kendre. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but he confirmed a lot of that this week when I talked to him. So let's just hear that interview real quick. This is Kendre Miller talking in the locker room on Wednesday about the injury he's been dealing with, the hamstring injury, which was to the opposite leg from the hamstring injury he suffered in camp that kept him out for, 3 months, basically. So here's Kendre.
Your injury initially, what was the deal with that? Was it, you said it was minor, and then the plan was for you to come back against the Panthers or the Falcons, and then it changed?
So the original plan was they was going to give me a down week against the Panthers. I could have played against the Panthers because that week I was running full speed, and I could have got to go if I just needed to. But they was like, okay, we're going to give you a down week. We're going to let you play against the Falcons. That's the plan that everybody was on the same page with. And then I got a call last minute this is what we're going to do. And like I said, it took me by surprise. I was just like, wow, that's a little harsh because everybody was on the same page in the building. So kind of threw me a curveball a little bit. But
yeah. It was mentally just kind of adjusting to that. Was that difficult? How did you go about doing that?
It really wasn't difficult because, like I said, I done been through a lot in this small little term. Thank God it hadn't been anything season ending, but it's always been something that was a little nick or something. So I wasn't mad or anything. It was just kind of surprising. I was like, it's just something else I got to go through. Like I said, I told them, I don't know if you was here, but when you go through hard times, that make who the person is. When they come out on the other side, and like I said, I ain't got nothing to prove to nobody, to myself. I know what I am, and the people in this building believe in me, and I just got to go out and do it now.
Gotcha. And then just in terms of the conversation you had with Riz, he mentioned he wanted to give you a clean slate and just make sure that you felt like everyone was supporting you more. So how did that conversation go on your end? Did that give you kind of a little confidence that you could, make your mark here? Yeah.
Well, the day that Riz, stepped in, me and him I had a talk with him in his office that day, and he was like, everything in the past that happened, he was like, that in now, whatever grudge anybody had in the building with you or for whatever reason, he was like, that in now, I want you here, you gonna be here. And like I said, he talked to y'all, and he was like, about the Doghouse thing, he was like, it ain't no Doghouse with me. He was like, I told the media, and I was like, shit, we letting the dog off the leash now. I'm ready to do my thing. I'm ready to get in that bark a little bit.
Gotcha. And just hearing that, is obviously he could have that idea, but just the fact that he said it out loud, how helpful is that? That's
a big deal because like I said, it definitely wasn't that in the past. I'm not a big person who need a pat on the back, but it'd be nice to hear that you want it a little bit. Every once in a while, or shown that you want it. And Rizzi has did a phenomenal job showing that he trusts in everybody. He gonna coach hard, but after that, it is nothing. It's next play mentality with him. All right.
So I have a question. So if DA's tires got slashed over the weekend, and we had to come up with a list of suspects. Would Kendre or Jameis Winston be at the top of the list?
I'll go with Kendre just because I think Jameis seems like too happy-go-lucky to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and Jameis is too far away. He'd have to get on a plane. I don't know where DA hangs out these days, but I imagine it's nearby. So no, I mean, yeah, clearly a frustrated man right there. And I don't blame him when you think about like when you're a guy who's been hurt a lot of your career and then you end up on IR for the second time in a season, it's like people don't care about the context. They're just like, this guy can't stay healthy. He's lazy. He's whatever. There's this narrative around him that he's just like, yeah, I had a minor hamstring injury and they threw me on IR, even though the plan was not for them to throw me on IR. Like, and he's more than willing to say that, which, he's not going to throw DA under the bus completely, it seems. But I mean, when he says, I thought we had an understanding, and then suddenly, that's one person. And, I do think that it'd be easy to say like, this is all DA. I think I understand why when a coach is frustrated with a guy and then suddenly it's like he just keeps getting hurt. I don't think he's doing the work. That, there's some reasonable frustration there. But, for Kendre, I'd like to think this has been kind of a wake-up call. And when Darren Rizzi talked about it, he said he doesn't have a doghouse at home. He doesn't have a doghouse at work. He doesn't have time to deal with a dog, whether it's a figurative dog or a literal dog. And so, like, he's just kind of letting Kendre be Kendre. And I'm hopeful that with kind of this era of his career behind him, he can kind of move forward and do the work he needs to do and be productive. Because, we've all seen it when he's been out there. He's been a quality football player. He just cannot get out there. He cannot stay healthy. So, maybe over the final 5 games of this season, you can get something that can give you some hope that he can be that guy going forward, and you can have a kind of a two-headed monster with him and Alvin. Even if this season is lost, which I think it is, obviously there's a chance you win your final 5 games and you go 9-8, probably miss the playoffs on a tiebreaker again, whatever. But like, this is about next season for a lot of guys, and one of those guys is Kendre.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, that soap opera between him and DA, at least it's over with and done. The one thing you can't criticize DA for, he's not getting Kendre injured and keeping him out. So, like you mentioned, we've seen those flashes and spurts where he's been a productive guy and looks like someone who could be a viable weapon for this offense, but just got to stay out there, dude. And obviously everybody's pulling for him. I love the fact that, he seems to be so motivated now with Riz leading the way, and he's got to know too. It's really time for him to put up or shut up kind of deal, because last year dealing with some injuries, and obviously this year the hamstring bug just couldn't let go of him. Hopefully down this stretch here now we get 5 straight games of Kendre going into next year. Yeah,
I mean, and there's no guarantee that he's on the roster next year at this point. Like, if it's Darren, I think you have a better chance then. But if you end up, changing everything at the head coach spot, even maybe you change a GM, I don't think it's going to happen. But like, whatever the new regime is going to come in and be like, why is he here? Like, what has he done to earn this roster spot? And they're not going to be beholden like, well, we spent a 3rd round pick on him, we should make it work. And they're like, no, I'm going to bring in my own guy if that's the difference. Like, I need a guy who's going to be available. So, this is on him to like put some good tape out there and prove that it's like he should be a part of this. Because right now it's just like, hey, he's got a locker in there. We know he's getting paid. That's about it. And with a 3rd round pick, your money's not guaranteed really after the second season. So like they could cut him and not, it wouldn't cost him a dime. So like this is an important 5-game stretch for him. Otherwise he'll probably end up on another roster somewhere and have to do it all again.
Maybe we should hope like Dennis Allen somehow ends up DC and Carolina, Tampa, or Atlanta. So we have like next year talking about the Kendre Miller revenge game. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sure he'll have 5 great carries and then get hurt. So we'll see. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just like, you don't have a lot of weapons on offense right now, and he's one of them. So hopefully he can get out there. One other thing we could talk about before moving on is, so this is a homecoming game for the Rizzler, Mr. Riz. He grew up in the Jersey area. He grew up watching the Giants. This is Darren kind of talking about that whole situation this week.
Yeah, listen, it's definitely interesting. I got to practice what I preach, quite frankly, with what I practice, what I preach with the players. I got to stay locked in. I can't get too wrapped up in the moment. I'm trying to. I'm gonna have to shut my phone off here at the end of the week. A lot of people reaching out, family, friends. It's a little bit surreal, quite frankly, but I got to do a great job of staying in the moment, staying focused on the game plan, and not get wrapped up into that. I can think about it after the fact, but definitely a unique situation. You know, I grew up obviously just about 15 minutes from the stadium there, rooting for the Giants, going to watch a lot of playoff games back when Bill Parcells was the coach, and so you know, that's certainly something on the back of my mind, but. Just trying to have the blinders on like everybody else and just trying to coach the game. Yeah, go ahead. No, go.
Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think, you know, when you get wrapped up in a game week and you're just thinking about, you know, I think all the hoopla prior to the game and all that stuff, but once the game starts and, you know, the first kickoff is kicked and you got to concentrate on the game management and all that stuff, that stuff kind of goes out the window. So whether we're home, on the road, no matter where it is, you got to stay locked into the game. And so, again, I'm trying to do a great job, just like I tell the players, of avoiding the distractions during the week. And so, you know, that's going to be important for me too.
So are you just shoving all this off on your wife, or?
I'm trying to. We tell the players the same thing. Listen, take care of all that stuff in the beginning of the week, and so the rest of the week's for football. So I try to, like I said, practice what I preach. So just trying to do that.
Yeah. So, you know, he's excited. He won't admit it that he's excited. You know, he's kind of bummed out that Tommy DeVito's not playing because Tommy DeVito went to high school at his high school's arch rival, and he kind of joked about it, like, "Oh, we're not going to talk about that at all, except blah blah." You know, so it's a you know, this is a big moment for him in terms of, like, who knows if he's ever going to get another chance to go to Jersey as a head coach and right. kind of hold court. So it's kind of a cool moment in a season that's kind of going nowhere. So hey, at least it's something to talk about.
And I know the team's going up a little bit early to get acclimated to the you know, the scene, the temperatures over there. But I think, like you mentioned, it's a big homecoming for Riz. I don't know how much time he's going to get to spend with family, though.
Yeah, I don't think they definitely necessarily had to twist his arm to be like, hey, should we go up on Friday? But like, you know, that's probably a good idea. Let's do that. Get some pizza. You know, that's what I need to figure out, is if I need to prioritize pizza or bagels.
Both.
Probably both, yeah. Bagel in the morning, a pizza at night.
And then you can get really cuckoo and get a pizza bagel.
Yeah, I'll just get some, you know, bagel bites. Is that, you know, like the microwave kind? Those are better up there, man. Right?
Yeah, those are terrible.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, I mean, that's really it from a news perspective. There hasn't been a lot going on this week. Rod Teamer got suspended. If that rises to your radar. Sounds like it's, you know, the description of it was he violated the substances of abuse policy. So it's not a PED suspension. Like last year, Jake Haener got I almost said arrested, got suspended for like a PED violation, which is, you know, he tested positive for some kind of banned substance. A lot of times it's like supplements, stuff that maybe they didn't even realize was in something they were taking, and they got dinged for it. In this case, it sounds more like a recreational thing. So it's not going to change much for the Saints. He's a practice squad guy. He's going to be out the next 3 games, but that's news. It's really that's the news we're looking at. It's been a boring week.
Shout out to Cam Jordan, selected the nominee for Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year from the Saints. Obviously, the work he does in the community is outstanding. They're posting constantly stuff he's doing on his off days, and not just one thing. It's like he's in different locations. Really amazing the work he's put in. Gotta love it.
Yeah, he does multiple school visits every Tuesday, which is the off day, right? Which is the day that these guys are typically like trying to rest and chill. Like recharge. They'll play a game. They played a game on Monday night in Kansas City, and he's still going to be in schools that next morning, like, because he wants to. Like no one would be like, oh, what an asshole. He's not, you know, waking up after. They get home like 4 a.m. from these trips, from these Monday night games, right? They come home directly after the game. It's midnight before the plane even takes off, probably later. You're talking about landing at 2, 3 a.m. And you go home, you go to sleep, and he's still going to these schools and doing all that stuff and doing turkey giveaways. And so, yeah, no, he you can talk all the shit you want about, oh, is he as productive as he once was and that and this and that and the other thing. You'll never question Cam's commitment to the city because it's next level.
Yeah, literally someone that you could say bleeds black and gold for sure.
I hope he doesn't literally bleed black and gold, because that would be, I mean, I'd be worried for his health. That would be, yeah, like, it might be like scurvy or something. Like, he'd probably get tested. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back with Paul Dottino, host/reporter for WFAN, the Giants radio network's been covering the Giants for like 4 decades now. So he has an idea of what he's talking about. We're going to talk about Daniel Jones, that debacle, all the other stuff. All the other debacles is just pick a debacle. We can talk about any debacle you want. There's been at least a dozen Giants-themed debacles this season. They've just been bad for a long time, except for that one year that they won a playoff game. It ended up being a bad thing because they paid Daniel Jones. Even the good things for the Giants turn into bad things. But hey, you can say the same thing about the Saints, it feels like.
Brady must have put a curse on him or something.
I think the longer this goes, the more likely it to be true that Tom Coughlin sold his soul to the devil for a pair of Super Bowls, and the Giants organization is now paying the price for that. It's the only explanation that makes sense to me.
He got the jewelry, though. No soul.
He did.
Hey.
He did, and he made the Packers miserable in the process. He ended Brett Favre's career, basically. The second time they won the Super Bowl, they beat the Packers again. That time the Packers were 15-1, hosted the Giants, and got beaten up at home. That was the game, and I will never forget this. So if you recall, Aaron Rodgers, for a period of time in his career, at his touchdown celebration was like the championship belt. Right. And then at some point he decided to basically sell that to State Farm.
Right.
As the discount double check. And so his patented touchdown celebration ended up being the discount double check. And in that playoff game, he got discount double checked by Michael Boley. Like, Michael Boley sacked him and did the discount double check over his dead body. And it's like, I feel like that was the point where I was like, Aaron Rodgers is never winning another Super Bowl as long as he lives. Because he was cursed he was discount double checked by Michael Boley at home in a playoff game after a 15-1 season. The Giants running back in that game was Ryan Grant. That's the team. Hakeem Nicks. Remember Hakeem Nicks? He was here for like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
he caught a Hail Mary at the end of the first half in that game. I remember my dad wanted to watch it, so he and my uncle decided, they're like, let's go to a Hooters. And we watched. I vividly remember watching that game at a Hooters and seeing Michael Boley discount double check Aaron Rodgers.
See, those lasting moments they'll have forever.
Light bulb memories of Hooters and Michael Boley. But all right, that's it. That's the walk down Giants memory lane for me personally. And we'll be coming back. Paul Dottino, who I'm sure also remembers the discount double check. I don't know if we'll have time to get into it, but it's important. I'm sure it's a framed photo somewhere in Michael Boley's house. Anyway, who dat? I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We'll be coming right back on Inside Black and Gold. Remember to subscribe. Stick around. All right, and we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller, getting y'all ready for Week 14. Saints at Giants. Saints are 4-8. Giants are 2-10. 18 losses between these teams. Has not been a particularly fun season on either end. But we're going to get you ready for that matchup. We're bringing in Paul Dottino, who's reporter and host for WFAN Giants Radio Network. You know, Paul, been a long season. How are things going out in Giants land these days?
Well, good to talk to you, fellas. And I don't know what your expectations were before the season, but I thought the Giants would probably be an 8-win team. Hover around 500, probably not make the playoffs, but certainly win a whole lot more games than they have. I suspect you guys may have felt the same way down there for that club.
Yeah. I don't think any team goes into the season thinking, we're going to lose these 7 games in a row. This is the plan, where it's all going to plan. No, it's been rough, but I think the difference is like the Giants. It felt like the Giants had a plan at their quarterback position, and that completely fell by the wayside about halfway through the year, right? Whereas the Saints, I feel like, are still kind of in that boat, and they're moving in the direction that, you know, they fired the coach, but, you know, like, it feels like when you don't have a quarterback, there's a very like narrow path to anything. Like you could have the greatest roster in the NFL, and if you don't have the quarterback, it doesn't feel so. How is that situation going right now? It just feels kind of bleak when you're looking and you're saying, well, Tommy DeVito is the guy they want to start, even though he wasn't the backup, and now you're talking about Drew Lock. So how is that whole situation unfolded?
Well, let me go backwards here because the Giants and Saints are playing this weekend, and you will see Drew Lock making his second consecutive start. Brian Dable told us earlier in the week that because Tommy DeVito still has a sore right forearm, which is his throwing arm, that he will not get to play. Now, he may be the number 2 if he feels good enough. Tim Boyle is the other active quarterback on the roster. He's been around the league for a few years and hasn't really done a whole lot. He's a journeyman, obviously. But that's why you're going to see Locke. Now, the other reason you will see him is because last week against Dallas, it was only a day before the game, the Thanksgiving game, when DeVito's arm really swelled up. And so they told Locke, literally during the walkthrough, you're probably going to have to make your first start of the season. So he never actually even had a regular practice at full speed with the guys he was going to play with. So Dable says it's twofold why he's going with Locke this week. One is because DeVito's arm isn't quite ready yet. And 2, because he really wanted to give Locke a full week of practice with the guys he would play with and see what it is that he could do. Actually, Locke did some good things against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. A very strong second half. They were down 13-10 at halftime. Then they were down by 17 points before you knew it. And then he brings them back with a couple of scoring drives in the fourth quarter. Made some really nice throws, ran for a touchdown, had another scramble of 28 yards where he knocked over the pylon, and then they spotted it at the 1. Giants took it in anyway. The point is, Locke did show the Giants some flashes of really good things. So here's where they stand. Locke and DeVito are both trying to make the most of their opportunities now during the final month and a half of the season to prove to the Giants that they need to be in the conversation going into next year as either a number 2 quarterback or potentially a bridge quarterback if the Giants decide they need a veteran bridge. Locke is a free agent at the end of the year. DeVito is an exclusive rights free agent at the end of the year. And we all know that Daniel Jones, at his own request after he was benched because of his injury guarantee, obviously that didn't work out. And so he wound up getting cut and signed with the Vikings practice squad. I will tell you this, fellas. The Giants really got themselves in a bad spot earlier this year. I honestly characterize it, and you guys will appreciate this down in New Orleans, right? I think somebody had a Giants voodoo doll in their basement and was sticking 10,000 pins in that voodoo doll every single weekend. The Giants gave away 4 games to charity in the first half of the season, where it was because of drop passes, and they're still amongst the top 2 or 3 teams in the league in drop passes, the most untimely penalties you've ever seen, okay, and very untimely sacks. I created a new word. I call the Giants unclutch. That's the way they were in the first half of the season. They never should have been in that boat. But because they gave away so many games to charity in the last month where they haven't played well enough to win, and they deserve to lose games, they're now at 2-10. When to be frank with you, they could easily, and I mean this, they could easily be 6-6 or 5-7. If that had happened and Daniel Jones had gotten some help, he never would have been benched because of the injury guarantee, because they would still be somewhat in the wild card conversation. But because everything kind of collapsed around him, they had no choice because of the injury guarantee to set him free.
Yeah, the Washington game, I feel like, is a good example of a game given away. I think it was like the first game ever where a team scored 3 touchdowns on offense, didn't allow a touchdown on defense, and lost the game as the Graham Gano gets hurt in warm-ups game. But
unbelievable.
Just to kind of I think anyone from an outside perspective would be like, okay, Drew Lock was the backup all year. So why, when Daniel Jones goes down, was it Tommy DeVito? Was there ever a explanation for that kind of held water? Because it just seems odd. Like if I'm Drew Lock, I'm kind of annoyed that I get
Right.
bypassed for the guy who's been holding the clipboard this whole time, not even getting reps in practice. So what was the kind of reasoning for that?
Well, there were actually two reasons for it. One was explained by the coach, and I'll give you that one first. And then I'll give you the second reason, which is kind of a little deeper into the onion. The first reason is that, as Brian Dable said, he was able to coach up Tommy DeVito all of last season when DeVito went 3-3 as a starter, as the Giants' third string. So he'd been in the system and had practiced all year within it. Also got most of the preseason reps. Drew Lock made a cameo in the preseason and got hurt. So he never ran, I think it was 1 or 2 plays with the Giants offense. And he got hurt, and then he was sidelined. And that was it. So, as Coach Dable said, DeVito knows the system. He's had a chance to actually play games with the system. He's been here for 2 years. And even Drew Lock, in his disappointment, admitted, look, he's had much more experience hands-on with that playbook and with these players than I have. So he kind of understood it. He didn't like it. He was disappointed. He was frustrated, but he saw the logic behind it. And that's really what it came down to in terms of the coach's reasoning. I'll give you another reason behind it, though, as well. There's a real chance the Giants go into this offseason with no quarterbacks signed on their roster. Boyle's not coming back, obviously. Jones has already been released. Locke is on a 1-year contract. And we told you DeVito's an exclusive rights free agent. So, to be honest, as they go into 2025 and they have to figure out who their potential starting quarterback will be, either a new rookie who they're going to have to try to build the franchise around, or a bridge. Well, I think they were thinking to themselves, and this is strictly logic based on my kind of sifting through the weeds, Tommy DeVito will only cost them about $1.5 million as an exclusive right free agent. Okay? If during the course of the last month, he shows that he's good enough to be a number 2, to be frank with you, I think he's good enough to be on an NFL roster, but I think he really is a number 3. I think he's kind of borderline being a 2. I think they wanted to see, Tommy, let's put the ball in your hands. Show us you can be a true number 2. And we'll feel great about taking you into next year on like $1.5 million as a number 2, giving us a little cap room flexibility to go out and spend money elsewhere. Locke is a free agent at the end of the year. He's got a $5 million base. Chances are likely, based on how things worked out, he's not coming back. So why would you play Drew Lock if you think you can create a legit number 2 at minimal cost? I think that was probably part of this decision as well. Now, because DeVito's arm swelled up, all of a sudden Drew Lock now has forced himself into the equation. Again, the last 2 weeks, DeVito played pretty well 2 weeks ago. Took some steps forward. Lock did the same last week. I tell you, if Lock has a big game against the Saints, and I don't know if he will, but if he does, I think he's going to get another start. And if he keeps that ball rolling, maybe he proves to the Giants that not only can he be the legit 2, maybe, just maybe, if he goes crazy in the last month of the season, he becomes the bridge. Guys, don't forget, when he came out of school a few years ago, he was a legit, number 2 second-round draft pick. I mean, he was thought of as a future NFL starter.
You mentioned drops right in the beginning, and just curious how former LSU Tiger Malik Neighbors has been adjusting to life with the G-men up in the Northeast.
Neighbors, you know what his stats are. I don't need to tell you that. I'll also tell you that my film study has him for 10 drops, which is way, way, way too high. Yeah. That's the part of his game that really sticks out like a sore thumb. The second part of his game is his yards after catch has been minimal. And this guy was supposed to come in and be an immediate shot of electricity, impact player who was going to be a deep threat for the Giants, if not with his speed and his ability to go downfield, but also because of what we were told was incredible yak yardage, his escapability, his quickness, his juke ability, the kinds of things that you can't teach. Well, I'll be frank with you. As a rookie, yeah, I get the fact that he's got 1 billion targets and he's got all those catches that he's got, but look at his average yards per catch. Look at his touchdowns. Well, the reason that those numbers aren't higher is, number one, he's not getting yak yardage at all, and number two, he's also had too many drops. So I would say, to be frank, he'll probably make the all-rookie NFL team at the end of the season because of his, overall stat line and production. But I'd say that there are certainly some disappointing factors that you have to look at when you grade his overall performance. There have been some disappointing moments. And I think, he certainly, he came out of school early. So let's also give him a little bit of slack. It does take guys time to grow into being a professional in all the different ways that you have to be a pro player.
Yeah, the stat that stands out to me for Neighbors is, you look at just targets, right? He's got 116 targets through 10 games, right? Yeah. That's third in the NFL. The two guys ahead of him are Garrett Wilson with 118, CeeDee Lamb with 124. Both of those guys have played in 12 games. So that's 2 extra games because Malik obviously missed a couple games with one of them was a concussion. I don't know if the other one was also the concussion, but, he's got 75 catches on those 116 targets, 740 yards. Yeah, his average depth of target is less than 10 yards downfield. And to me, I look at that and I say, was Daniel Jones holding him back? Because I grew up watching the Giants. I still try to watch the Giants when I can. It's always disappointing, but I do it anyway. I have a friend who we meet up at a bar and we're like, oh, let's do it. It's like almost like punishment these days. But when I watched the Giants play, it was like Daniel Jones can't get the ball down the field. And you have Malik and Jalen Hyatt who are just not getting used. And I just wonder, was the system you were watching with Malik and getting all these targets, but all these kind of short range targets, was that what it was supposed to be? It just seems like that ended up what it was because of maybe Daniel Jones' deficiencies. Has it looked any different?
I know there's a national narrative out there. 2 years ago, in 2022, when the Giants made the playoffs, Daniel Jones across the board had the best deep passing stats of any quarterback in the league. So I fight back against that narrative, which has become so popular this year, and I think is unjustified because he already proved that was false. Now, it is true he came off the ACL injury, and he was inconsistent this season. I won't deny that. He was inconsistent. Inconsistent doesn't mean he stunk. And it doesn't mean that a lot of the blame needs to go on him. I think the Giants system, look, fellas, I'll tell you this. Back at the Combine, I was a real proponent for the Giants to draft Rome Odunze because I wanted to get the bigger receiver with the bigger box and the big length and the deep threat and all of the maturity. I thought he would be the perfect fit for the Giants wide receiver room. But Brian Daboll, who decided this year that he would call the plays after not doing it during the first 2 seasons, and he allowed Mike Kafka, the OC, to call the plays, Daboll is one who really wants to get the ball out quick, and he wants to rely on yak yardage. So my partner and I down at the Combine, we talked about it, and we said Daboll was going to want Neighbors. He is the perfect fit for the stuff that Daboll wants to run. And I said, well, that's great. If it's me, I want Odunze. I want the bigger guy. Part of the reason is because when you're throwing the ball further downfield, the guy with the bigger catch radius and the length and the ability to get 50-50 balls is, to me, going to be the more productive guy in those situations. I was not as big a fan of the yak yardage guy, which, by the way, Odell Beckham Jr. did make a living with the Giants when he was a superstar earlier in his career. He made a living on yak yardage. Take a 10-yard slant and go 55 yards. I get that. It's the only time, in all honesty, in my career, and I've been covering the Giants now for 42 seasons, it's the only time in my career that I ever saw a receiver truly live more off yak yardage. And to me, that's a rarity. I think you're relying on a lot of different things. I prefer my deeper threats to be bigger targets with the catch radius, etc. So I think that while Neighbors fits the Giants system really well, I'm not the biggest proponent of that system. I think it does, especially with bigger corners in the league nowadays. A lot of these guys are 6 feet and 6'1", and they have more length. So if you're trying to throw the ball, downfield, 30 yards or whatever it is, downfield, and these corners have good coverage, well, their catch radius or the ability to defend a catch radius is a lot better than it was 5 or 6 years ago. So either you better have a skyscraping receiver that's going to be able to take care of business down there, okay? Or he's just going to have to be so incredibly fast that he can flat out win the route every time. So for me, I don't know that the system, even though it fits the receiver, I don't know that it's the way I would have gone. But I understand it. Explosive, dynamic, incredibly talented. Neighbors has all the things that you want in that type of receiver. I just wish the Giants had a big skyscraper who could go downfield. And maybe if they had Neighbors and that other guy, Neighbors and Odunze, maybe this would have worked out a whole lot better.
A guy that definitely is scary for Saints fans going into this matchup. I know there's not many, but on offense with Tyrone Tracy Jr., both teams have been awful against the run. Just curious about this kid, 5th-round pick out of Purdue, what you can tell us about him.
Terrific player. When he first came into college, of course, then he transferred over there. He was a wide receiver, and he was converted into a running back. Terrific vision, patience, shows running back instincts, has terrific hands catching the ball out of the backfield. Love his quickness, love his juke ability. Now, where does Tyrone Tracy still have to clean things up? He's got to do some more stuff in pass pro, which he's worked very hard at, and he's actually become kind of adequate. And the other thing is he's put the ball on the ground a few times, and that's a bit disappointing. But again, like one of the fumbles he had a couple weeks back, he was switching the ball from hand to hand because he thought to himself, and this is a good thing, right? He thought to himself, oh, the contact is coming from this side, I better switch the ball to the other hand. That's what all good running backs will tell you to do. So he was thinking along the right process, but then in the conversion to the other hand, the ball got punched free. So, that's the kind of thing you're going to live with as he goes through growing pains. Maybe as he develops more and gets more time at the position, because he's now the primary back ahead of Devin Singletary, maybe he'll make that switch earlier in the run, before the contact comes, and then he'll be able to grip it harder, and then the fumble won't happen. So, or maybe he won't even have to think about it. He'll do it instinctively, and then he'll be able to concentrate more on holding the ball instead of actually thinking about how I have to switch it. He's going to be on the all NFL rookie team, no question in my mind, as one of the 2 running backs. He's a terrific young talent and a great kid, by the way. He's 24. He's a year older. He's one of those guys who took advantage of the extra time in college after COVID.
Yeah, he's funny because you hear all the time, oh, he's from a wide receiver. You look at him out there and was like, he doesn't look like a wide receiver. Like,
no,
it's weird that he was ever a wide receiver when you kind of look at his build. Like, he's a running back build. So whoever made that decision initially was just wrong. But he's been fun to watch. He's one of the few times I'll turn on a Giants game and be like, oh, who's that guy? And like, okay, I can see, you can see a future there. You can see it building. I guess my last question for you. So, you go back to the Bucs game when you look at this, what they did on defense, they just blitzed relentlessly and they put Tommy DeVito on his back all day. I think the Giants did a better job in pass protection against the Cowboys, it seemed. But, what is the state of that offensive line? Because there's a lot of first-round picks invested there, or at least 2 of them, and I don't think either guy's going to play, and Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas, obviously.
Right.
And then the interior, I think, yours. So what's the status of that offensive line? And, is that kind of the biggest issue for this team right now in terms of, you have a backup quarterback playing behind a patchwork offensive line, not a ton of weapons. Theo Johnson's not even there anymore. So what is kind of when you look at that, where do you see that going?
Yeah, for most of the season, the rebuilt offensive line that had 3 new starters on it was functional. And I define functional as an offensive line that will allow the coach to call any play in his playbook at any time with a reasonable chance of success. That's how I define a functional offensive line. To me, that's the minimum goal for any NFL team. If you don't have that, and your coach has to start throwing out pages or chapters of his playbook, given where he is on the field, that's a huge problem. The Giants have had a dysfunctional offensive line for most of the past decade. This year, first half of the season, the offensive line was functional. It was everything else that was going wrong. Well, now the offensive line is badly beaten up. So without Andrew Thomas at left tackle, the starter, without Jermaine Illuminor, the starting right tackle, who had to go to the left side, and then Evan Neal, who finally healed from his injuries and got off the bench, became the starting right tackle. Well, now Neal is also hurt. So their top 3 tackles are hurt, which means you're going to get the grizzled veteran Chris Hubbard, who is basically better at guard than he is at tackle. He's going to play one of the tackles. And Joshua Azudu, a third-year pro whose career has been beset by injuries and has played both guard and tackle in the league, he will be the other starting tackle this week, at least the way it lines up right now. So, that's not a great situation for any quarterback, no matter who you are, a backup or a starter in this league. That's going to be a pretty tough deal when you're down to really your 4th and 5th offensive tackles starting in the game. The guards, Greg Van Roten, longtime vet, is the right guard. John Runyon, longtime vet as well, is the left guard. Those guys have been functional basically for most of the season. Last couple of weeks haven't played as well. And John Michael Schmitz is the second-year center, who in the last month, again, inconsistent. Looked like he was coming along really well, and then he's had some scuffling games over the course of the last month. So that's the line as it looks for the most part. I would say if I had to grade the Giants' offensive line, and by the way, I absolutely do not believe in analytics whatsoever. I believe in data, but I believe you take that data and you analyze it yourself based on all the circumstances that you know, not some guy pumping numbers into a computer and printing out on black and white paper some crazy grade. I don't buy that at all. I think the Giants' offensive line, for the most part this year, has been functional and probably right at the bottom of the second third of the league. The league, in my opinion, gets cut up into 3 spots, right? Your top tier, then your middle mediocrity, and then your bottom tier. I think the Giants, from being at the bottom of the bottom tier at the offensive line spot for many, many seasons, I think they've actually graduated to the bottom of the second tier as an offensive line when they've got their 5 starters. They don't have their 5 starters this week. So I have no idea how ugly this could get.
Yeah, we know all about that. I always get a kick out of seeing John Runyon's name on the Giants offensive line, because I remember watching Michael Strahan and the older John Runyon go at it, and it was always these battles. And it's when they signed him this offseason, I was like, oh yeah, look at that.
And how true is that? And by the way, Ryan Ramczyk was a guy who I wanted to get on the Giants when he came out of school. I was a big Ramczyk fan, and his career obviously got detoured by injury, because I just thought he was going to be terrific.
Yeah, we're missing him for sure.
Yeah. All right, Steve, you got anything else?
Just curious, obviously the defense hurting with the latest injuries to Dexter Lawrence too, and their main sack leader. But the team's been able to generate the pressure and get those sacks this season. But man, takeaways have just been pretty slim to none. And I know the secondary has no interceptions. The one pick on the team is to a linebacker.
Darius Muasau, a rookie linebacker from UCLA, caught a pass deflected by Dexter Lawrence in Week 1 against Minnesota. It is the only interception the Giants have this season. It is absurd.
That's crazy.
I believe they're -8 in turnover ratio, which is just horrific they're down near the bottom of the league. I think in the bottom 3 or 4 of the NFL, which obviously is a big part of why they are where they are.
Right.
The pass rush, which up until about 2 weeks ago, I think was leading the NFL in sacks, is now, I believe, 6th in the league. Because obviously, in the last couple of weeks, teams have either done a better job of running the ball and haven't had to throw it as much, or they've decided, this pass rush is a real killer. We got to get the ball out quicker. And so the Giants' sack numbers have really taken a dive over the course of the last few weeks. And now Dexter Lawrence is out, as you know, and you said, so he has the dislocated elbow. The Giants, in all honesty, they're talking about Nacho Nunez-Roches probably not playing this week. Dexter Lawrence is already not playing this week. And those are your 2 starting defensive tackles. One of their rotation guys, DJ Davidson, is also hurt and limited and probably not going to play this week. So 3 out of the, usually they rotate 3 guys. Maybe a 4th defensive tackle gets in for a few plays. But you're talking about, 90% of the snaps at defensive tackle will not be available this week. They're thinking about adding another 100 pounds to me and asking me to play. So that's not good. Trust me. I don't like pain. So it's a bad situation for the Giants right now. So in that regard, the Saints are catching them at the right time. The Giants have had their troubles, and this week, because of the injuries that have now piled on at like an unbelievable number. Bobby Okereke, their middle linebacker, who last year had an all-pro season but didn't get named, he's had a tougher time this year, and now he is also banged up, and it looks like he probably won't play. So think about that, right? 90% of your defensive tackles probably won't play, and your star middle linebacker, who leads the team with over 90 tackles, is probably not going to play. Now, you may want to show this tape to Alvin Kamara because I'm sure he's going to be licking his chops.
Sounds like a 2-10 team to me.
Right now, that's exactly what it is. And the shame of it is because all these injuries have now started to pile up in the last week or two, it doesn't look like it's going to even out at all.
Yeah, it's tough. And once that snowball starts rolling down a hill with the season's lost, and they're just trying to keep everyone on track. Like you're just trying to not let it roll off the tracks. And obviously, the Giants are going to have to answer questions about Dable's future, Shane's future, but that's down the road.
Well, even worse, they haven't won a home game all season.
Right, that's wild.
So the fans in the building are extremely frustrated and fed up. And so now the Saints are coming up here. I think it's going to be about 40 degrees, a brisk but not necessarily brutal December day in the Meadowlands. Don't know what the winds are going to be. Today, they're between 40 and 50 miles an hour. Don't know what they're going to be on Sunday. But, the usual, or at least the hoped-for Giants home field advantage, well, the fans are kind of down right now on this team. So it doesn't take much to quiet them down, or for that matter, to turn on the Giants.
Well, all right. Thanks so much, Paul Dottino, reporter/host for WFAN Giants Radio Network. Thanks so much for the time, man. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to a brisk 40 degrees out there on Sunday. Appreciate the time, man.
Oh, good to talk to you, fellas. Enjoy the holidays.
Appreciate you, Paul. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to Paul Dottino for coming on. Yeah, a lot of good information there. It's just, I think both of these teams, you look at it and you're like, okay, what hasn't gone wrong? Because it seems like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. It's the, Murphy's Law situation. And I think the difference between the Saints and the Giants right now, the biggest difference is the Saints have some strong veteran players that are going to keep them kind of pulling in the right direction. And the Giants don't have that. And the ones they have are hurt, and I don't know. You talk about the sacks. He was talking about the sacks there. It's actually been a down year for sacks in the NFL. It's only a handful of players with double-digit sacks right now. Trey Hendrickson is leading the league with 11.5. But, that's not a crazy number. Like, we're in week 14. Like, you're not going to see a single player pushing 18, 20 sacks this year. Not one. Like, the league leader in sacks is going to be around, 15. Dexter Lawrence was one off of the lead in terms of he had 9 sacks or 2 off the lead. He had 9 sacks from the defensive tackle position. That's a crazy number. That's like an Aaron Donald-esque number. And you know who's the second? Like, at least guys listed at defensive tackle, like Leonard Williams is technically a defensive end, so it's tough. But like the next closest defensive tackle from a sacks perspective, you know who it is?
Brian Brzee?
It is. It's Brian Brzee. Yeah, 6.5. So like to put up 9 sacks from the defensive tackle spot is crazy, especially when you're getting like there's no one else on that defense. Like he's getting double teamed constantly. Like he's facing double teams on almost every snap, and he's still getting in for 9 sacks. So not having him, it's like, yeah, if you're the Giant, I mean, if you're the Saints, you're like, yeah, we don't have to double anybody. We can go man up across the offensive line and just go 5 out every snap.
It's wild to think. You look at the number of injuries on the Giants defense, and then you look at the Saints and the number of injuries on the offense. It's like crisscross, but the same issues.
Yeah. No, these teams have a lot in common. The only difference is the Saints still have like their quarterback answer, and the Giants do not. But I mean, you look at weapons, and they aren't really there. The Giants at least have their top wide receiver. The defense, like Deonte Banks might not even play. He's their top cornerback. No, it's a mess, and the Saints are going to win this game. I mean, they're going to win this game. They might make it more interesting than it has to be, but I don't even think that's going to happen. Like I think this Giants team is done.
What's wild too, Paul mentioned it too, obviously a 2-10 team. Both the wins came on the road. They haven't even won a game at home this year.
I can't even think of the teams they beat. They beat the Seahawks
Cleveland,
on the road.
It was the other one.
I can't remember the other one.
They won in Seattle, in Cleveland.
Oh, Cleveland. Yes, Cleveland. But that was like the Deshaun Watson Cleveland. Like
right.
The didn't realize how bad they actually were Cleveland at that point. The Seahawks game is inexplicable. That makes no sense. Isaiah Simmons blocked a game-tying field goal. He leaped over the A gap and blocked it. That's how they won that game. But we'll see. But all right.
Yeah, you look after the Saints. Giants get Baltimore, Atlanta, the Colts, and the Eagles. So they got a tough slate ahead for sure.
I've been saying for about 3 or 4 weeks now the Giants are not going to win another game. And
locking up that number 1 pick, baby.
And I just feel more and more confident about that every week. Like this is the week. This is probably their best chance. We got a home game against the Saints, and I'm not giving them any chance. I don't think they're gonna put up a fight. Now, if they run the ball, maybe. If they can control the clock, and Tyrone Tracy is, but like you're gonna
some, obviously you lose the turnover battle in a ridiculous fashion, and yeah, some things happen. Some crazy things happen, but we've seen that this year, so I don't know.
Right, you muff a punt.
Yes.
You know, something like that. Like you screw up and you give away free points, and suddenly you're chasing, and the defensive line, like they can get after it. Like Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau are good.
Right.
It's tough to be effective as a pass rush when your interior is tissue paper, because you know, like if you don't force a double team on the interior at all, then you can just chip and chip and chip on both sides and not be worried about it in the pass game. And then you can just run up the middle. Like it's funny because the Saints are a wide zone run scheme, but I feel like in this game, I'm running these inside zones. I'm not wasting my time trying to stretch out Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. I'm attacking whoever the hell is manning the interior of that defensive line, because I don't believe it's going to be anybody. They might as well not have them there. They might as well start 8 DBs. But yeah, anyway, that's it. That's all I got. Anything else before we move on?
No, it's we've talked about it a little bit too. A little primer for you before going to Green Bay. We'll be cold, but not ridiculously cold. But I said, you get a little acclimated to some cold weather. You know, the MetLife Stadium, I think those winds are swirling in there too. He mentioned it was a crazy day in New Jersey, New York today. Hopefully that's not the case, because obviously that affects passes. It affects field goals. It could be a nightmare all around, and just really solidifying a kind of ground and pound game there.
Yeah, no question. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. I am Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We're getting ready for Saints at Giants. Whatever you want to call it. It's not going to be a good game, but it might be a win. So it is what it is. And until that time, we will do it. We're going to come back. We're going to break down X Factors. We're going to do it quickly, because the farther we get into this season, the less sensible these X Factor segments seem, because it's like, what's the X Factor? Either you win or you lose, and you ruin a draft pick or you don't. That's where you are right now.
I did lose a valuable. I felt like if we go through all these past podcasts, my usual go-to X factor on offense was Taysom Hill, so I'm screwed now.
Yeah, I don't even know what we're going to say anymore. It's a mess. But all right, who dat? Go Saints. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller getting you ready for Week 14. Saints at Giants. 6 wins and 18 losses between these two teams. Great stuff. The NFC should be proud. No, they shouldn't. But we're going to get into it. Thanks again to Paul Dottino for coming on. A lot of great information there. I appreciate his enthusiasm for his team, considering it's like, I think, it's funny because the Saints, it feels like there's this kind of expectation that their baseline is going to be high. And even like Paul going into the year, he was like, I was confident we were going to be like an 8-win team. And it's like, man, that would have been nice, wouldn't it? An 8-win team. Like, that's the expectation level for the Giants. And that's because outside of that one playoff year where they kind of, I don't know, Daniel Jones was a different guy. They won a playoff game over the Vikings, basically got Kirk Cousins canned. And got Daniel Jones paid, and then they haven't been good since. They weren't good before that. They haven't been good after that. It's just this kind of weird that 1 year did not – it actually worked to their disadvantage. But now we're here, and whereas the Saints, it's like every year you go into it being like trying to convince yourself this is a 10-win team, and then you're like, okay, fine. But here we are, and the Saints are 4-8. They're probably going to win 2 more games, I'd guess, get to 6-11 and have a number 9 pick in the draft or something like that. This is one of their wins. And one of the reasons that I feel like this is true is, when you have Mark Schlereth saying these types of things about you, you have like analysts don't want to call guys out. Like Brian Dable and Mark Schlereth know each other. Like if Mark Schlereth talks shit about Brian can text him and be like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
Like, these guys don't just throw terms like clown show out there unless they mean it. This is what Mark Schlereth said about the Giants this weekend, WWL.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the whole way they handled Daniel Jones is a joke. And they handled the backup. I'd get benching him. You're going to bench him. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. But when you bench him and then the guy who played backup quarterback for you for 11 weeks in a row that would have gone in if Daniel Jones gets hurt, gets usurped in the pecking order by your third-team quarterback who doesn't take reps during the week because your second-teamer gets them, both as the second-team quarterback and as the scout-team quarterback, then all of a sudden you hand him the job because his name is Tommy Cutlets and he resonates with Giants fans. So you give him the job and you usurp the backup quarterback because your excuse is, well, he knows the offense better. Well, if he knew the offense better, he would have been your backup quarterback. Like that whole thing is such a debacle, and it's an absolute clown show, and it's embarrassing. And if I was a player in that organization and I was sitting in that locker room, I wouldn't trust anybody within the organization that runs it as far as I could throw them. And Dable's a friend of mine. And I just look at that, and I don't know if that comes from Joe Shane. I don't know if it comes from Dable. I don't know if it comes from the owner. But it's a clown show. And, and they come out and play after that, and they're playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they just absolutely get throttled in that game.
They quit in that game,
30-7.
They quit in that game. I mean, you could see them specifically on defense, like they weren't trying to tackle or anything.
No, it was awful from the word go. They Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, blitzed them 75% of the time in the first half. And I always joke around. I was with the guys on the set of Breakfast Ball, and they were like, Malik Neighbors is mad because he said, hey, they didn't give me the ball until the fourth quarter, and we need to start the ball, getting the ball in my hands. And I always joke around, the further you get away from the football, the less you actually know about the game. I go, why do you think a wide receiver didn't get the ball early? Because you're peeling the quarterback up off the turf every freaking play, They brought pressure. They jammed. They played man-to-man, brought pressure on just about on every 75% of the plays. They sacked him 4 times in the first half. They had him under duress the whole game. There's a reason you didn't get the ball, moron, because the quarterback couldn't throw the ball. Like it blows me away that you don't understand how the game works. 10 of the guys have to do their job for you to sniff the football. And when they're bringing pressure and you guys can't block them, you're not going to get the ball. Like the fact that it was an epiphany that all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, Malik Neighbors, you started getting the ball when they called off the dogs. Yeah, you did start getting the ball. Like, come on, you guys. It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, Mark is not a fan of the Giants these days. Also not a fan of Malik Neighbors, who he called, quote, a moron for complaining that he's not getting the ball. I'm not sure I hate anything more than Mark Schlereth hates diva wide receivers, is what I've learned from listening.
What I love about Mark is he kind of reminds me of the Cajun Cannon. He's not afraid to let it fly. He don't care. Whatever I feel, I'm going to let you know.
I am curious whether he'd bring that same energy with him on Giants radio. Maybe he'd tone it down a little bit, but who knows? Maybe he would. Maybe he would. And that's when he would get those texts from Dabes. But no, it's going to be interesting to see how the Saints handle this. One of the things that I think is interesting is how they handle the cold. And this game, it's funny because like if it affects you in this game, then you basically don't have a shot in 2 weeks when you go out to Green Bay. And I asked Derek Carr, what his experience is in cold weather games. This is what he said.
Games, obviously, Kansas City probably a couple times, right?
Yeah, I've played in Kansas, played in New York multiple times. I don't know, 4 or 5. I don't know the exact number. And there's things now that I learned some things like the last 3 years that you can do in the cold that helps to where you just feel good. Before that, I was just going out there having no idea, about certain things. But you learn tricks as you get older and different things. So, now it's just about playing the game. They got so much stuff nowadays that, you're just playing football.
Your preparation does change a little just to get ready, obviously?
Nothing that I do during the week. Besides rolling my windows down on the way here, in the mornings. But, besides that, no. I mean, you try to do little things mentally and things like that. But, you prepare for the game, and then when you get out there, I always had a coach tell me, if you let it affect you, it will. And so you just go out there and you just got to play.
Yeah, and so, I tried to go back and look and see, like, okay, how has Derek played in cold weather games? It's tough because most of those games have been against the Chiefs,
Fair.
So like in the last several years of Derek in Vegas or Oakland, like it's like, okay, well, they lost 38-3. They're like, okay, but they would have lost against the Chiefs either way. So is that because it was cold or because, and so it's hard to really find kind of a corollary for, okay, is he good in the cold? Is he not? Well, I think we'll find out. We didn't see Derek have to play in the cold at all last year. I do think it's important. Like, there's a lot of things that you have to do to kind of get prepared. I think for a quarterback, it's important because how you deliver the ball, how you kind of keep your arm loose, keep your arm warm. Like, you're going to have to throw at some point. You would love to just be able to run the ball all game. Maybe that's what they do. I'm definitely not going to start Blake Grupe in fantasy this week because I don't know. Like Paul's talking about 40-mile-an-hour winds. We'll see how that goes. But
I know MetLife seems to have those swirling winds in that stadium.
It does. It's a weird dynamic because it's not it's hard to, like, you go to Chicago and you know where the wind's typically coming from. It's kind of a standard, like, it's coming off the lake, or it's the orientation of the stadium. At MetLife, it's like you never know which direction the wind's going to be coming from. So yeah, definitely not my fantasy kicker. But I do think it's interesting, and I asked Darren too, like, is there anything you do to kind of prepare? He mentioned going up on Friday, like we talked about earlier. I do think they're going to do their walkthrough outside, so there is part of it is kind of acclimating to that temperature. It's also not going to be crazy cold. It's a noon start, so you'll have
that helps.
Assuming it doesn't seem like there's going to be any inclement weather, so you'll at least have the sun looking at you, as opposed to in a couple weeks on Monday night in Green Bay. It's just a nightmare. I'm so dreading that game, right?
Get those hand warmers ready, buddy.
The only thing I can hope is that you beat the Giants this week, which you're going to beat the Giants this week. I've never been more confident that the Saints are going to win a game than for a bad Saints team is going to win a game than I am right now. The Saints are going to go up to New York and beat the Giants. But like Washington the week after that, because if you win that game against Washington, then you keep that like thread of a hope alive.
Right.
Maybe you win your final 5 games, you get to 9-8 and give yourself a chance. If you lose that game against Washington, that goes away, and you're talking about 8-9 as your best record. And I just feel like the motivation to go up and win a game in that weather will not be there. And the second you lose that, and you're going through the motions, like you can't be just going through the motions in that environment. If you are, you're going to lose that game by 3 scores. So we'll see how they handle it this week, and I think it is going to be interesting to watch. We'll see how I handle it this week. And I'm going to try to do my best to not complain the entire time, but it's going to be tough. I am.
The cold weather to me isn't that much of an issue. It's when you have to deal with if there's also rain or wind, and that makes it totally miserable.
Yeah, but I am a delicate little flower.
You'll have enough bundled up gear.
Yeah, I do need to. I probably need to take some time today to actually assess what I have. And I had a friend tell me that I should just wait until I get to Green Bay and then go to Goodwill, because I'll never find better deals on like parkas than I will at a Goodwill in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Robert Carroll, engineer extraordinaire, he's got the hookup with the Saints equipment staff. They'll get you gear, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But anyway, we're not just talking about the cold. There is a football game to play. It's just there's nothing really fun to talk about with the football game. But so the X factors, we talked about Schlereth, talked about the quarterback with the Giants. I think this is the type of game that, and this is the type of stretch down the end of this season that it's like, I need to see Derek Carr show me why he's a better option than a Drew Lock, right? Because there's a lot of Drew Lock caliber quarterbacks in the NFL. You can go find a Drew Lock. You can look under a rock and find 2 or 3 Drew Locks just hanging out. And so why is Derek Carr a better option to start than kind of this also ran $5 million a year quarterback that you could find anywhere? You could go get Andy Dalton and throw him in there. Why is Derek the better option? And I think without Taysom Hill helping him out, without, any weapons on wide receiver, like this is the type of game that you need your quarterback to be the difference maker in. And this is what I want to see. I want to see Derek go out there and have a really good game, have a really strong game. I need him to stop maybe being so passive when it comes to the pass rush and trying to get I'm okay with him taking a sack or 2. I think maybe he's gone a little bit too far in that direction at this point. Of the second he senses any pressure, get it out. And like, I appreciate the impulse in a lot of instances, but in this type of game, it's like, just go put points on the board. Like, you can take a couple sacks, it's okay. So I'd like to see Derek kind of be like, I want to watch a game where I come out of it thinking like Derek Carr was by far the best quarterback in that game, because it feels like it's been a while since I've had that feeling, at least a couple weeks.
You mentioned it too with the Saints. You kind of like, I don't want to say guaranteeing a win, but yeah, you're penciling this in already. I think a lot of people are. The only road win this season was in Dallas week 2. That's wild to think about as well. For the Saints.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've only won 4 games, so it's not like they've been dominating at home either. But yeah, the 3 of their wins have come at home. You got the Panthers, you got the Falcons, and you got the Browns. 2 of those wins have come in the last 3 weeks. So, well, that's not true. That's 4 weeks. So, last 3 games. So, yeah, it would be nice to see them go out. Like Derek, I don't think the road home splits have been that significantly different for Derek. Some of his better games have come on the road. And in Tampa last year, he had a really good game. In Indy last year, he had a really good game. In Dallas, he had a really good game. I thought he played reasonably well against the Falcons the first time they matched up with him. It was just that kind of weird tip ball interception that did not work. So
yeah, the perfect bounce up in the air.
That ball was in the air. I don't think that ball has landed yet. It's just floating, and it grew wings up there and just sort of.
Yeah, for me, a big factor too. Who's going to help out Alvin Kamara as a playmaker on this offense? Because Obviously, I think he's going to get a heavy load against this Giants defense that's just as bad as the Saints in the run game. But you can't just, lay it all on him. Is Kendre Miller going to be able to play on Sunday? If not, do you get, Jordan Mims some action? Jamal Williams, we actually saw take a little bit of snaps in the last game. It was good to see him get some touches. But I just know that Alvin's the workhorse. I just don't want to overload the workhorse.
Kendre's going to play. Kendre's going to play. There's no way.
It sure sounds like it, right?
I mean, barring some crazy setback, another injury, something like that. Like, based on what we know today, Kendre is going to play. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. There's no way
to pick him up in fantasy. Obviously, you're going at the end of the year right now, and you're looking. It's like I don't know what he's going to do, but could be someone you could stash on your bench for a playoff run if you're desperate at running back.
If you're desperate, sure. But and it's only because I think there's a scenario where the last 2 games of the year, like if you, for example, lose to I almost said it again, Washington and the Commanders, right? Not the Washington, it's the Washington Commanders. And then lose to the Packers. Then week 17 against the Raiders, week 18 against the Bucks. What are you gaining from throwing Alvin out there? You're actually the risk of him tearing up his knee in a game that doesn't matter and then affecting next season is more significant than I think the value of him getting out there. So I think from a fantasy perspective, and a lot of leagues don't even go into week 18. A lot of leagues wrap up their fantasy in week 17, their fantasy championship in week 17. But if he could be a league winner if you end up kind of pulling the plug on Alvin after week 16 and suddenly you're throwing Kendre in there against a really suspect Raiders defense and maybe he goes off in that game. So not a terrible idea to stash him. I hope that we get to a point where it's like, yeah, let's see what he has. It would require him to get through the next 3 games without an injury, which has he ever gone 3 games without an injury? Is that something he's done in his career? I don't think he has. Maybe because he started his career with an injury, came back. I think he may have gotten 3 or 4 games in a row his rookie season prior to week 9 against the Bears when he sprained his ankle. So maybe he had like 4 or 5 games in a row there. Definitely wasn't featured. So, yeah.
And that's the thing, too. With no Taysom vulturing away those carries either, you got to figure, feed Kendre, please, and let's see what he can do.
You got to give someone carries, and you can't just be giving Alvin the ball 25 times, especially in a season like this. And you extended Alvin. So it's like there's no – it's not like, oh, we have nothing to lose because he's gone next year. No, he's back next year. So, you got to be careful with that because he's going to be a huge piece of your offense. A couple other questions, so X factor, if you will. I expect to see Kevin Austin signed to the active roster by next week. I think he's going to be on the roster. And the only question is, how do you do that? Taysom Hill will be sent to IR, so that'll free up a roster spot. But you also need to sign probably someone. You also need to add Kendre Miller back to the active roster, so that's that spot, right? So it's not like you can just sign the wide receiver into Taysom's spot. You got to figure that out. I kind of feel like Nick Saldiveri is going to end up going to IR, which would free up that spot. And then you could sign Kevin Austin. But do you want to bring Bub Means back from IR? That's another roster spot. So Dante Pettis has been an elevation each of the last 3 weeks. You can't elevate him again. So if you want him out there returning punts, you'd have to sign him. I kind of feel like you're going to end up elevating Jermaine Jackson and using him as your punt returner again, just to make the numbers work on offense. Because I just don't think you have the roster spots to make that happen, considering, okay, Lucas Patrick, hopefully he plays, but you're going to have a backup. You already signed Kyle Hergel to the active roster, so we'll see. But this is Kevin Austin talking this week about kind of the opportunity he's had and how he's approached it.
100% positive. I mean, I keep a positive mindset all the time. And so I would say I definitely thought that this was a goal in mind. I was not going to stop until I got to this position. So I would say continuously every single day, just working hard, keeping my head down, just to stay focused, to obviously have this opportunity come and present itself.
And I don't know, do you remember what it was like when you got the call from the Saints to come try out and like what's going through your mind when you're playing one of the lower leagues? get a chance back in it?
Oh, just felt grateful, and I felt grateful for the opportunity. Like I said before, obviously I just kept my head down and worked hard. The UFL, it was what it was. It was a great opportunity as well, but obviously the Saints calling me and asking me to come here for camp and everything like that. I just understood that I just had to do the same things that I've been doing since I was in college, which is work hard, and everything else was going to come, with it.
How are you a different receiver now than, your stint with the Jags, kind of your first taste in the NFL?
I would just say being more developed. Having coaches. Coach Dub is a great coach that helps all of us really just hone into our individual specific needs as receivers. So him giving us those plans to get better, I feel like has helped me throughout this process, especially throughout camp and since I've been here.
So yeah, I think you look at, the final 5 games, maybe you turn this into something, maybe you win your last 5 games and you go 9-8, whatever. I think when you're looking at this Saints roster, like the priority has to be, what do we have in these players, particularly the young players, particularly the ones who, beyond this season, we have to figure out if they're a part of the picture. And so I think that's why Alontae Taylor, you're going to have him on the outside the rest of the way, because I already know what he can do in the slot. I need to know whether he can be my future on the outside. Same thing with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Safety is a tougher question because I just don't know if you have anyone there that you're like, okay, this is a guy. But to me, at wide receiver, I really like Kevin Austin. I think Kevin Austin has an NFL skill set. I think he's built like an NFL wide receiver. I think every opportunity he's had to make a big catch, he's made big catches. And they haven't all been perfect throws. They haven't all been just dump offs. Heck, he had a nice play on an end around, a little kind of reverse that he picked up 9 yards on last week. Like, the athleticism is there. You watch him play and you're like, wait, this guy wasn't an NFL receiver before? Like, why? Like, what did he have to do differently to get an opportunity? And so, I don't know. Like, you look at him, you look at MBS. These are guys who, could be a part of the equation beyond this year. And it's not like this wide receiver room. We went into the season being like, the depth's not there. I like the guys at the top, but beyond that, So, there's plenty of opportunity to be had in this wide receiver room, even beyond, like, even outside of, there's a lot of injuries right now. Like, next year, even if everyone's healthy, you're still going to have opportunities for guys that are in roster spots. I remember back early in training camp, like Keith Williams, like screaming at Kevin Austin about like some of his releases because he was kind of freelancing. I think he said like he was doing like hezzy releases and they don't do hezzy releases. And, it's just kind of interesting because, it's coaching, right? It's not like screaming at a guy is not a negative thing as long as that person takes that coaching and does better. And I think that's what you've seen from Kevin is, maybe that wasn't always the case. He obviously had a stint with Jacksonville. It didn't work out. He ended up in the UFL. He's on the Saints now. He's a more mature guy. So now I'm hopeful that, he can kind of develop because, again, you look at him out there and you don't think like, oh, this guy's not an NFL receiver. You think, where was this guy? Where was he hiding? Is he freaking 6'2", 210, can run a 4.4 40, has hands? Why not?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the defensive end, I guess, rotation really shakes out at the end here because the pass rush hasn't been really effective. Curious to know what Isaiah Foskey's doing, if anything, besides special team stuff. And you got a guy, Tano Passanio, looking to get back in the mix. Obviously a veteran there, not a young guy, but just overall that Saints defensive line, I want to see something maybe changed up towards these last 5 games just because they haven't been getting to the quarterback and they're not stopping the run either. So,
yeah, it would be nice to see Isaiah get some kind of opportunity. Again, just because, especially I think like I don't think you're making any changes now on the defensive line with an eye on, okay, who needs a chance? Who do we want to see? But I think, if this next 3 games goes a certain way, like I said, and you're going to week 17 and your season's basically over, yeah, I want to see Isaiah out there. Do I need to see Tano? Probably not, just in the sense of I know what he's got. Like there's nothing he has to prove other than, okay, he's back healthy. So yeah, maybe he's the guy you get into the mix. I don't think he's going to change a ton for you on the defensive line, but it would be for him from a mental perspective of, okay, I worked all the way back. It'd be nice to get some reps before the end of this season would be good. But again, it's a roster management question because to add him back to the active roster, you would have to cut somebody, and you don't want to do that. Now there could be injuries between now and then that make that a lot easier. The same way if there's injuries now at the wide receiver position where, okay, you were able to bring in an MVS who you probably didn't have a spot for previously. So we'll have to wait and see. But no, I agree with you. I think that's the next factor the rest of the season. And I think the next factor in this game of, can you stop the run? The Rams are tough, and Schlereth broke this down pretty well too. And one thing that the Rams were able to do, and you saw this play out throughout that game, is when they run Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua out there in 11 personnel or in 12 personnel, right? Like one running back, two tight ends, two running backs, one tight end. They're basically tight ends. So the Rams are putting out 11 personnel, but they have big wide receivers who can block, and that forces the Saints to match up. And there were times in that game where the Saints were trying to defend like a 4th and 1 with 11 personnel or with nickel personnel, with just like you have only 2 linebackers on the field instead of 3. And in a 4th and 1 situation, you're going heavy. But they were able to catch you in a look on 3rd down, go fast, and not allow you to sub. And that's part of the reason you had a hard time tackling, is you're asking Will Harris to come up and tackle instead of Willie Gay, right? It's the wrong Will. You want the other Will, not that Will, the bigger Will. So, I'm interested to see how that happens in this game, because there's no one on the Giants that you would say, they're the opposite. Their receivers are Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson are both tiny. Darius Slayton's a bigger dude, but I'm not worried about matching up with Darius Slayton. So, you got to be able to stop the run in this game. It's the only way the Giants are going to have a lick of hope of competing is to run the ball, and it's going to be with Tyrone Tracy, maybe Devin Singletary. He's still part of that rotation. But no, you gotta be more competitive than you were against the Rams on the ground. There's no question. So hopefully that starts this week.
No, and the Tyrone Tracy, obviously, you see what he's done this year. Been one of the bright spots for the Giants in a really dismal season for them. We talk about obviously the Saints having a down year. The G-men have just struggled all around. And you heard the comments about Malik Neighbors with those drops. Definitely not a good sign his rookie season. Hopefully he can get things fixed, but not this game.
I think Malik's just been so annoyed with Daniel Jones this entire season. I know Paul said he doesn't buy the deep ball thing, but I've watched Daniel Jones play. He can't throw deep balls. It's like there's a difference between being accurate when the guy's wide open and actually being able to throw a competitive pass into a one-on-one window. And there's just none of that. There's none of that. And like Malik has 116 targets this year. So he's going to have some drops. Now, the problem for Malik is his drops have come in pivotal situations, like third and 5, where you got a first down. All he has to do is catch the dang ball, and he didn't do it. So yeah, I just haven't, like, I've watched Malik. I think has been very good, but he has not done anything that makes me feel like, oh, this is like, you watch Jamar Chase out there, and he he does so many things that you're like, okay, he's a stud, and he's been a stud since day one. It helps that he has Joe Burrow, a guy he's comfortable with. I haven't gotten that feeling with Malik. He's made some really incredible catches, but I just don't think they're using him correctly. And so, it'll be fun to watch. It'll be a fun matchup with him and Alante out there on the outside, or Kool-Aid, whoever he matches up with. I don't know if I have to look and see if he moves into the slot. I don't think he does a lot out of the slot. But yeah, there's two matchups: is Tyrone Tracy on offense, Malik Neighbors on offense. That's it. That's the only thing that's worth watching for the Giants these days.
Yeah, and I'm hoping MVS can continue his touchdown streak, make it 4 straight games.
I hope so too, because I have to start him in fantasy this week, which means that streak will end.
You mentioned that it's the last week in a lot of leagues before going into the playoffs, and there's so many guys on buys.
Yeah,
it is ridiculous to have buys this late, I feel like.
Who wants a week 14 bye? I guess if you're a playoff team, you do. Like if you're a team that's like the Broncos, for example.
Yeah.
No, they're 8-5, right? So this is a perfect time to get a bye for them, because it's like you've made it, you've survived this far, and now you get to rest and kind of get set for the stretch run. But if you're a team that's like the Saints, or like, a week 14, it's too late. It's too late. Like Washington's a good example.
Now, Denver, Indianapolis, New England, Washington, Baltimore, and Houston all off this week.
And they're all good teams. They're all playoff teams, right? Maybe not Indianapolis. Yeah. But hey, who cares?
I just look at it from like a fantasy perspective. I looked at my roster and I was like, oh my goodness, like there's like 5-6 guys I got in a bye. I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah, no, I had a whole mess of problems. Like I have Zay Flowers and Lamar Jackson in one league. I'm like, well, what am I gonna do now? I managed to get Russell Wilson. I did pick up Isaac Guerrero, which I spent all of my remaining
waiver wire claim.
I spent all of my remaining fab to get him. I had like $28 left because it's one of those leagues where you have to bid on him. And I was like, nah, like what are the, like, because at this point in your fantasy season, there's only like 4 or 5 teams that are even picking up guys on the waiver wire. And like the idea that you're able to find a starting running back, a RB1 at this point in the season for free off of waivers, like I'm willing to spend, I would spend 100 of my fantasy. I was surprised that I was able to get him with only 28, but I think maybe not everyone had as much. Anyway, Isaac Guerrero, he's going to be this year's Kenneth Farrow for me, which was the guy that I ended up starting instead of Jordan Howard in my fantasy semifinals one year that got 1 point and Jordan Howard went off for 20 and I lost. That's going to be Isaac Guerrero this year because Kenneth Farrow took over late in the year and I was like,
Yeah, we talked a little bit about injuries. Niners, both running backs done.
Yeah. Isaac Guerrero. I don't even know who this guy is. I watched him play once, but I know he's going to get chances. And honestly, the Niners, if you look at the Niners, they always turn a running back for like Eli Mitchell suddenly like, oh, okay. Like they don't need a Christian McCaffrey. Like they can turn no-name running backs into star. Like Jordan Mason was leading the league in rushing yards for a while. So I have a good feeling about Isaac Guerrero. But hey, the 49ers are going nowhere. It's a lost season for them, basically. Got to avoid that running back minefield. But all right, anything else you want to hit? I know it's kind of a low-energy episode.
No, I thought Dottino brought the energy, though.
He did. He made up for my lack of anything. I stayed up late watching UConn beat Baylor, and I never recovered. And I say stayed up late. The game started at 5:30. It was over by 8.
Man,
but they did win, so it's good. Dan Hurley didn't throw a temper tantrum. Everyone wins.
Winning makes everything better, of course.
Sure does. It sure does. But all right, who dat? Go Saints. Thanks everyone for listening. This is going to kind of be the schedule the rest of the way. I think we're going to kind of dump back to 2 episodes a week, at least full episodes. We're going to try to post the game previews episode on Thursday. Where, based on how things go the next few weeks, we might scrap the crossover interview and just start talking about Saints topics as opposed to the upcoming game, because if the games don't matter, I'm not going to waste your time on them. But for now, we're going to keep doing it. We'll see at least through next week, because I think they win this week. And then if they beat the Commanders, it's still worth talking about. If they lose to the Commanders. So we'll do that. I'm going to try to start posting more kind of vignette items, shorter items into the podcast feed. Kind of like if you are on YouTube and you see like, oh, they posted an interview with Darren Rizzi, stuff like that. Probably start throwing that into the podcast feed for the podcast listeners as well. So it's not going to be completely dead throughout the week, but I'm just going to try some new things, see how it goes the rest of this season. But as always, thanks everyone for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Hit the rate review button wherever you get your podcast. Ring the bell if you're watching this on YouTube. And until the next time, go Giants. I'm sorry. That's not what I meant to say. Go Saints.
Who dat?
Who is that? No, that was a joke. It was a bad joke. Go Saints. That's it.
Get it done.
Peace.